the virtual component. Anyone wishing to address the board virtually may join the meeting online at, do I really have to say the whole HTTPS thing these days?
You can, for the people who are watching on YouTube, in case they want to comment.
But like mountainview.zoom.
That will work.
All right, thank you. mountainview.zoom.us/J/4/810-475-52190. One more time, that's mountainview.zoom.us/J/4/810-475-52190. Or by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering the webinar ID 8104-7552-190. When the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, click the raise hand feature in Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. When the chair calls your name to provide public comment, you are participating via phone, press *6 to unmute yourself. Any emails received by 4:30 p.m. today were forwarded to the Peace Hub. Emails received after 4:30 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. Ms. Ramberg, would you please take the roll?
Yes, Chair Frank.
Present.
Vice Chair Wang. Present. Member Ayar. Present. Member Brodowski.
Present.
Member Langton.
Present.
Member Souter.
Present.
And Member Tang.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes approval, Peace Hub minutes approval first, April 27, 2023. Does anyone have any questions about the meeting minutes? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I so move.
A second.
Would you like to take the roll?
Going around the table this time, Member Souter. Member Langton.
Yes.
Member Ayar. Yes. Member Brodowski.
Yes.
Member Tang.
Abstain, just because I wasn't there.
Member Frank.
Yes.
And Member Wang.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, oral communications. Item 4 is oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting was reserved for persons wishing to address the advisory board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes. During this section, state law prohibits the Peace Hub from acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public like to provide public comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, please click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have one in person and one online.
We generally take the in-person commenter first. You can present your card when you're done speaking.
Hi, thanks. Tim, he, him pronouns. Nice to meet in the meet world, some of you. It's lovely to be able to be in person. And I just want to thank you guys for all the work that you did making this hybrid. It's actually kind of funny. The third in-person meeting is the first one that I was able to attend, and I could have done virtually, but I do really enjoy being able to be present in this space with you. And thank you for the work and effort that you did to make that a reality. I really appreciate it.
We have 2 online. The first was Bruce England.
I'm sorry for the text. Is the public supposed to be visible to the folks that are watching? It's not possible with the way that the camera is situated. I just got a text that Tim was offline and people wanted to see him, and just raise that.
That's great.
You ready for Bruce?
Yes.
I was waiting for the unmute. Thank you very much. Bruce England speaking for MVC Pro, which is Mountain View Coalition for Police Reform and Accountability, which is a mouthful. And I have a few items for this section of the meeting. I have to switch over to it. 3 things. We have a question about the process for closing out subcommittees. I think at the last meeting, there was a discussion about possibly ending one of them, which started a conversation, but it wasn't agendized, I don't think. So it seems like whenever a subcommittee is going to be closed, or at least going to be considered being closed, that should be agendized, and there should be a process for that. And if you need it, maybe something for PSEB to consider. Second, we would like to see a standing item in the agenda for each subcommittee, each active subcommittee, even if there's nothing to report. This is a good way to provide accountability to the public and to yourselves to know what each subcommittee is actually working on between meetings. And lastly, we continue to be interested in seeing increased representation from the other parts of public safety, such as the fire department and EMS. In particular, because there's a change in the role for the staff liaison potentially and a new police chief. This might be a good time to reconsider that. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Yeah, I'd also just like to say thank you for the hybrid, and hi, Tim. Sorry that we can't see you all the time. There you are. Oh, maybe I'll be there in person next time. We'll see. Right. Also, hi, Max. This is last one is Chief.
What is Chief, Alex?
Again.
Again.
Thank you. Any more?
Not online.
And did the gentleman want to speak?
No, just grab one in case.
All right, very good. We will now close the oral communications item and move on to discussion item. We have a full agenda tonight to facilitate participation by all PSOB members. I will be recognizing in turn each member who signals they are ready to speak. After all members who wish to speak on an item have done so, I will recognize members who have additional comments. Moving on to number 5, discussion item, MVPD annual report by Interim Police Chief Max Bozell. My neighbor will present the MVPD annual report for 2022.
Thank you, Chair Frank, Vice Chair Wang, board members. It's my honor to present to you our 2022 annual report. My name is Max Bozell. I serve as your interim police chief since Chris Young's retirement in February, and I feel kind of full circle with this because in the time of my retirement, the seeds for this board were planted, and to finish my time in the interim capacity as chief here at this board is a full circle event for me. So I've presented our annual report to the Human Relations Commission, and this is the first time that I'm honored to be able to present that to you as a Public Safety Advisory Board. So Captain Saul Jaeger and I will be taking turns. I'll start with an overview, and then Saul will get into more of the details of our division operations at the end of the presentation. So starting off, these are the categories or areas that you find in your copy of the annual report, which should be included in the materials that you have in front of you. And just an overview here, we have about 30,000 calls for service that were either initiated or dispatched by our staff in response to serving the community. And about 1,500 of those were emergency calls or dispatched emergency calls over the course of the year. And this is roughly the same from 2021 and a little bit lower than pandemic levels, which averaged about 35,000 prior to 2020. Our demographics in the organization proudly continue to reflect generally the demographics that are reported in census within the community. And this is a challenging prospect for an agency because when the chief hires staff, they're hiring someone today, and over the course of time, the demographics in the city changes. So what we might try to represent as the diversity of our community today may not necessarily reflect the diversity of the community in 10, 15, or 20 years. So Luckily, I think through many decades of innovative recruiting, we've been able to maintain at least a diversity within ethnicity. Where we continue to struggle and look to improve is our representation of females in the sworn ranks. We've been lower than 10%, but we've also been higher than 10%. And I think some of the hirings that you'll be seeing in the next several months will reflect an effort to increase that representation within the department. Crime trends and activities. So last year was a year of transition, and the way the department reported to the state and federal government our crime statistics in the city. We shifted from something called uniform crime reporting. Uniform crime reporting, the FBI initiated, I think in the 70s, and it reflects a count of crime in communities that represent homicide, rape, aggravated assaults, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, robbery. And it was an effort to show consistency or trends with consistency across the United States. Over the years, that has become antiquated, and the FBI shifted to something called the National Incident-Based Reporting System. And last year, with the new records management system, we transitioned to this, which counts crimes a little bit differently. And we group them now in groups A and B. So we're looking at apples to oranges instead of apples to apples as we compare statistics across the prior years until over the trend years, we'll be able to catch up and show the NIBR statistics in years moving forward. However, you can see that the predominant issue for the community continues to be property crimes that are reported to us at 3,336 and 941 person crimes. Now, the person crimes under the old UCR are aggravated assault, homicide. Robbery is actually considered a property crime, although a person is under fear or a victim of force, but it's actually considered a property crime. Under NIBRs, the person crime categories are broader and more extensive. So we'll see different numbers moving forward and hopefully receive a more accurate picture of the type of incidents we're responding and reacting and trying to prevent. Under arrests, we see a significant decrease in COVID years and even last year with the number of arrests that we've encountered. And these include everything from warrant arrest to misdemeanor to felony arrests for crime. The height in this particular chart being back in 2019, and last year went from in 2019 over 2,000 to just 985 adult arrests, and juvenile arrests trending downward to 21 from 65 back in 2019. And years prior, actually, we were in the hundreds with juvenile crimes. So there's been a significant decrease trending certainly over the last decade. And we also provided for you some areas of interest that we typically get from members of the community. This is not specifically referenced in the annual report itself, but they are, of course, topics that we hear about and we receive inquiries about, including fatal collisions or 72-hour tows, catalytic converter theft, ghost gun seizures, and mental health calls for service. And the chart above shows you the kind of consistent low numbers in our fatal collisions, the significant decrease in the number of 72-hour tows. Of course, we just recently returned with that practice post-COVID. So we'll see what those numbers trend this year. The catalytic converter thefts also have been increasing, and ghost gun seizures, while minimal, reflect that we are now seeing what we had not in prior years. And our mental health calls for service are trending a little bit down, but within the mid ranges as well. So gang cases, we've been tracking for several decades. The city had a more predominant issue of gang violence in the 90s, and it tapered off a little bit in the beginning of the 21st century. However, we do still have issues of involving gangs, and gangs for us are defined in the penal code There's a definition, and it talks about an ongoing group, organization, or association of 3 or more people who have a common name or common identifying sign or symbol that are primary, their primary activity is the commission of 1 or more criminal acts as described in the penal code. And the members either separately or collectively engage or have engaged in those criminal acts. And based on that definition, along with our gang experts who are certified in their testimony to courts involving gang activity, certain gang cases are classified as gang crime. And you can see that it's trended significantly lower in recent years, especially post-pandemic, which we hope continues. We do unfortunately still have issues, including some pretty serious assaults that have occurred since my return here in February. So unfortunately, it's not something that I can say we're eliminating completely. Our Emergency Communications Center is operated within the police department and takes, we call it a PSAP rather. So it's not similar to your acronym. It's actually a Public Safety Answering Point. It's our 911 system, and we take calls for police, fire, EMS. We also contract services with the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District and dispatch after hours for public works. So it's quite a busy operation involving multiple jurisdictions with a variety of responsibilities around in-progress incidents, from crime to suspicious activity to service cases to emergency medical calls in which they give instructions for emergency care, including delivering babies, and also fire response as well. So they're a very comprehensive service that we provide to the community. And just over 100,000 calls were taken in that center last year. About 4,540 were our emergency 7-digit line, and almost 27,000 are 911 calls, and a lot, 77,000 were answered on non-emergency line. Our contact data is something we've also collected for a number of years. We started with traffic stop data in the late 1990s and expanded that to all contacts to really get an idea of not just who we contact in an enforcement capacity for traffic violations, but also who we encounter who are victims of crime, witnesses of crime, who were described as suspects or identified as suspects and involved in arrests or citations. And we break this out by US Census demographics. And surprisingly, although this is not contrasted to prior years, from having seen these charts over the years, they're fairly consistent over the progression of time. What's changed, of course, is the population in the community has increased, and the demographics somewhat have changed related to the type of ethnicity and race within the census in the community. So this represents about 10,400 total contacts. And you can see the breakdown in which there's about 2,000 citations and arrests, 2,400 suspects, 1,000 witnesses, and almost 3,000 victims involved in the percentages of those breakdowns. We also report in our annual report the uses of force that we are involved with in an arrest situation. And at the bottom there where it's covered up, the total number of uses of force are 9. So you can contrast that to the number of arrests that we're involved in, which is 2,000. And it's a very small percentage of arrests that actually involve a use of force. The predominant use of force, uncontrolled takedowns, which is the physical contact of an officer on a suspect in which they are then brought to the ground and apprehended. And in that case, we've had of those 1 minor injury. Personal weapon would also involve either the hands or feet of a police officer, and the use of force, whether it be an attempt to apprehension or in self-defense. And that resulted in 1 moderate injury. Fortunately, nothing more serious. And the majority, of course, there you see the 9, 5 resulted in no injury to the suspects. Within our professional standards unit, we have our personnel complaint investigations that are either generated internally or through external reporting. And you can see that at the close of the year, we found 2 sustained violations of misconduct or policy violations. 2 were unfounded, 6 were not sustained. Pending at that time of the end of the year were 2, which continue into this calendar year and would be reported next year. We do also like to talk about the positive things our personnel are involved with serving the community, and we had 19 formal commendations, no formal awards, which are the higher awards involving things like the Medal of Valor, or award for heroism or life-saving, or an officer who's injured in the course of performing their duties. You will see an award this next calendar for 2023 next year, because we did already award one of our officers the Purple Heart for having been injured after sustaining a gunshot wound last year in a traffic stop. We do monitor our pursuits. We have a fairly comprehensive review of when we are engaged in a vehicle pursuit of a violator or suspect. And 2 were initiated. There was 1 apprehension, and both were within policy. There's restrictions about when an officer, because of the inherent dangers of vehicles traveling at a very high speed and typically erratically, there are conditions in which must be met in which an officer can then pursue a suspect.
I'll give it to Saul. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to take over from here, and I'm going to walk you guys through the different divisions and quick updates on those sections, and then we'll take questions at the end. Before I do go forward, though, it is ironic a little bit that Max is here on the last time he's going to have a PSAB meeting, and somebody that actually started this and seeded this idea. So from me and from the police department, thank you so much for all of your service and 2.0 help.
Thank you.
Again, looking forward to Mike coming in, and
Exciting time.
where we're at. Okay. First division we're going to look at is traffic. If you follow the annual report, that's in there as well. So the traffic unit are the motorcycle officers that you see there. Trending again, similar to crime with traffic. We saw a large decrease in the amount of traffic in general during the pandemic, which also resulted in lower crashes and other things that were involved in that. We're seeing a kind of return to normalcy a bit in 2022 with an increase in crashes and collisions, traffic issues and complaints and congestion. So that's happening as well. And it seems to be so far back to similar to pre-pandemic levels. Our K9 unit this year had 450 training hours total, and it is the three dogs that were there for 2022. And just we had 105 deployments, and just to identify, I don't know if the definition of what a deployment is has ever been really talked about, but a deployment for us is utilizing the dog and handler team for really any task that they're trained for. That could be evidence, that could be tracking, it could be trailing, tracking, apprehension, and protection work. So anytime the dog is brought out of the car to do something, that's counted for them as a deployment. And then in that time, and there's some examples of some of the cases that we helped with, and some of the cases where there were apprehensions on there as well. But in 2022, we also had 4 apprehensions. Just to give you some ideas prior to that, 2021 had 520 hours of training, and in 2020, we had 700. Sometimes those training hours and deployment times are because the dog and the handler team might be out, injured, or off for some other reason. Or like in Maya, 2022 was when she started. So there's a little bit of there. Also, I'd like to point out with the canines too, we're one of the few agencies in the area that is a find and bark agency, not a find and bite agency. So our dogs are trained to, if they find an alert to somebody, they pause and stop and bark. They don't just bite. Which takes a lot more training. The next section is our youth services section. So in this section now, there's 1 sergeant, 3 school resource officers, 1 fantastic police activities lead coordinator, and 2 police assistants. Not that the other ones are not fantastic. They're all fantastic. You had already done a lot of work with the school resource officer program, so we're not going to go too much into detail with that in regards to the manual that was developed and finalized as well. So you have that one, but we did want to call that out as well, and very proud of our SRO program and the work that they do every day. The Neighborhood and Event Services Unit, everybody knows Jen Leah. We're very proud again of the fact that in this unit, we've referred over 100 people to Project Home Key in 2022, and there's more in 2023. Specifically, 15 individuals and families were also referred to Move Mountain View program. Very helpful, resulting in 10 adults and 2 families to receive permanent housing as well out of that program. And then this unit also does a lot of the community presentations, which has been low recently and coming out of the pandemic. And already in 2023, we've presented, I think, 7 community presentations so far. Neighborhood Event Services Unit. Investigations, so ISD is the Investigative Services Division. It's broken up into 3 different units. Crimes Against Persons, which has 1 sergeant and 4 detectives assigned to it. Crime Suppression Unit, which is our surveillance sort of undercover unit, narcotics work, and support for the rest of the department. They have 1 sergeant and 3 detectives. And our Cyber and Financial and Fraud Crimes Unit, which is 1 sergeant and 2 detectives, and also have the Cyber Forensic Lab under them as well. And then we also have 1 detective assigned to each of the 3 task forces in the county, which is the Regional Auto Theft Task Force, RADF, the Santa Clara County Specialized Enforcement Team, or CSET, and the the Regional Enforcement Allied Computer Team, the high-tech crimes team that's for the county. There was a lot of cases in 2022, and we've been very busy on the investigative side. Some of the standouts, and I was going to call this out for commendations for in 2023, there's going to be a larger number than normal because of the homicide case from the one of the concerts that we had that was involving the Hells Angels. That resulted in many of our officers doing fantastic work and professional staff doing fantastic work that's going to be commended in this year, in addition to some cold cases as well. We do continue to see a lot of property crime, which is the Crime Suppression Unit's focus as well. The catalytic converters and auto burglaries it's a regional issue, and we are working together with the other agencies and allied agencies in the area for that. And we're seeing a continued uptick, unfortunately, in cyber-related child crime, and that one's actually very much increasing as we move forward. We are continuing to lead and innovate. We're excited to announce, the MVPDX program continues to be really popular, and we're going to be starting to recruit for the 5th cohort in just a few weeks. That should be in late August and September to start rolling for that. And of course, our social channels continue to break records and do amazing things to connect with our community. And we are at the questions section. Do I say the magic? That concludes our presentation.
No, I said that. Okay, here we go. I have to read the words, otherwise I don't know what I'm doing here. Do any board members have any questions before I open this to the public? Yes, Member Brodowski.
So, just in terms of crime trends, which show a sharp decrease in 21 and 22, you attribute these to COVID. And that's because people tended to stay home because they're afraid to go out and rob anybody because they were.
Yeah,
What's the logic behind it?
Thanks for the question. We are not criminologists, so, I guess anecdotally, we can come to conclusions. There are, I think, a variety of conditions that the pandemic brought in, which include change in people commuting, coming into work, downtown not being vibrant, officers being restricted from doing proactive policing, contacting individuals, and less folks out and about, which resulted in less activity for us. That's what anecdotally we concluded. So that, I think, can be supported based on the fact that post-pandemic, we're starting to see increases in that trend. So there's a correlation there, I guess, based on our observation.
There's also the fact that people were staying home, so they were there. So that home is now no longer necessarily a target because people are there. Yeah, they're staying, the cars are there, everything's home.
And then I noticed that there were 54 cases of kidnapping. What does that mean? Is that like a divorced father running off with his kids usually?
Right. So the way crime is reported in NIBRS is different than what we might charge as kidnapping in the California Penal Code under 207 PC, which you may think of as like kidnapping for ransom. So yes, I think the numbers reflect everything from child custody issues to a kidnapping, which can be something like recently a case we were involved in which female victim got into a pickup truck and the person refused to stop, even though they may not have wanted to take that person for ransom. They took that person against their will and moved them to a different location, which would be considered under law defined kidnapping.
One of the nice things about NIBRS is that it counts for every crime that's committed in one incident. So you could have kidnapping and
You could have
above,
one incident and have about 10.
potentially, yeah.
strikes.
Where in the UCR time, it's just whatever's the highest one, and it's one time.
And then there are 208 cases of aggravated assaults. Are these localized within certain parts of Mountain View? Do they tend to be, for instance, like downtown at 2 a.m, or what's going on with those?
A good question. We typically see more aggravated assaults downtown weekend hours, and also, at Shoreline Amphitheater during certain concert that venue. Certain concerts can bring more serious assaults. There's simple assault, which results in a minor injury, and aggravated assaults, which are more serious injury or with a weapon or potentially involving an attempt to cause more serious injury. There's no one specific location that we point to. It happens, can happen anywhere in the city, but yes, a downtown location would typically be more common than a residential neighborhood.
Okay. And then finally on this page, how do you get pickpockets?
Yeah, so we call that, NIBRS calls it pickpockets. We call that grand theft from person. That could be anything from, let's say you have your purse in a shopping cart and someone steals it. That's considered a grand theft from person, as long as that purse is within a proximity of your control, or a theft off your person, personal property.
So that's pickpocketing.
That's pickpocketing.
Same one. Another thing is where I live, we've had a case of what some of my neighbors are calling elder abuse. Where would that go?
So we do report, or we have reported, although I don't think the mechanism by which this particular NIBRS report is consistent with past years. In past years, we had a separate category for elder abuse crime. And just for reference, anytime a senior is involved as a victim of a crime, that is specifically charged as a part of the commission of that crime if we apprehend and prosecute a suspect. And that is reported as a separate category. We do have that information, but it may not be a part of our annual report. We can certainly provide that to you.
As a senior crime, and what's a senior? Over 65, over 50?
Good question. Since I'm almost 60, I think it's 60 and over.
65.
I hope it keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah, that's similar to like, you'll see elder abuse, but you'll see like a stealing of money, a financial crime. It's not an aggravated assault or anything. And that'll be called two things in NIBRS, right? And yeah, versus an assault, which, would also be called two things on it.
And even our UCR, where we just reported the one crime, we did specifically define what elder crimes were we had responded to. And they're not surprisingly dealing with my mom's own fraud issues, who's 97. We don't have as many as you would think, at least in past years.
Okay. And then, well, this question is answered. My question is, why would gang cases go down in COVID years? But you answered that. People are staying home. Is that essentially the?
Yes, and schools were out as well. We have a fair number of issues or concerns around school activity that could involve gangs. So the fact that they're out of school, that's another reason that's probably the case.
Oh, and then under data entry, you have 56 sex offender registrants. That means people who live in Mountain View who are registered as sex offenders.
Yes.
And then you have, different from that, violations. That means those are people that you arrested separately from these or could be overlapped. It's not.
So 56 people registered as a requirement, either because they live or they're transitory and come into the city and are required within so many days to register with us, even though they might be leaving in a short time. And the violations are those that fail to register and are out of compliance.
Oh, okay. So these are people who've already been determined. Okay. And then a question that's really, it's just, I would just like feedback on it. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of sex offenders having to register once they've done their time. Could I have your, could I have an academic reply to that?
I'm not an academic, but I can give you a practitioner's reply. Having sat on the California Sex Offender Management Board for a number of years, California was one of the only states of just a couple that had lifetime registration requirements up until just a few years ago. The laws were changed to reflect a tiered registration requirement based on the seriousness of the offense. So, for example, you might have what's called a Romeo and Juliet case, in which a 19-year-old boy is with a 16-year-old girl, but they are then married and have a family and children, which under California law could be a felony case of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. And that person could be subject to sex registration. Under the new law, those cases are looked at differently than just a blanket lifetime registration. If in that particular case, registration is required at all. But you might have someone who is gets arrested and convicted as for indecent exposure, and as a condition of the sentencing is required to register, and that person may only have to register for a period of 10 years. Whereas someone, for example, commits a serious violent assault with the intent to commit rape, that might be a lifetime registration requirement depending on the court's determination.
And it's the court that decides?
It's the court that decides, yes.
Then finally, last question. The total number of contacts in 2022 was about 30,000. But we have only 9 cases of use of force. Really?
Yes.
Okay. End of question.
Anyone else?
Thank you both. I really appreciate your presentation. I'm especially interested, I really appreciate the data on the mental health calls for service, and I'm really interested in seeing how that changes in future years with trust and MCRT and all these other things coming in. I also really appreciate the data on the neighborhoods and event services and kind of specifically the community events data. And I'd love to see that also for the SRO program, if that's possible. So I saw that there was like the PAL boxing and all these other things that they do, but I think it'd be really great to see the efforts that are going on to have structured outreach to community members. So I think seeing that next year would be really cool. I saw that there was a significant decrease in juvenile arrests between 2019 and 2022. And I'm just kind of curious, like what happened between then and if there was any change in policy or just, I don't know, environment.
I think similar to the general activity over the COVID pandemic period is there was that significant decrease that we've observed across the board related to our contacts and arrests. And it's reflected not just in juveniles, but adults. But interestingly, and I don't know the answer to this, it's really trended downward over many years. Some of it might be law changes in the way in which laws are enforced, the type of laws, for example, whereas, drug possession or marijuana case is an example, although even juveniles, technically it's illegal under 21 to possess, but also diversion, programming, restorative justice. So those are potential reasons why that trend it's declining.
Thank you. And I also, this wasn't in the presentation, but I saw a big data point for the number of narcotic items booked. I'm wondering if you have information on the trend of that over time and whether that's increased or decreased.
Yes, I can look at that and get a determination for you how that's progressed over the last 5 years.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
With regards to the NIBRS program, the FBI basically mandated that as of June 21st of 2021 or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm not certain if it was a mandate or a serious request in the sense that California has not been moving towards NIBRS for many years, while other parts of the nation already has adopted it. But there's a strong effort in California, and part of that reasoning is within the State Department of Justice, the infrastructure and reporting was the legacy system was uniform crime reporting, and to get the change to NIBRS was a significant technological change in the system. So agencies have started adopting. I don't think all have.
When did Mountain View make the complete transition?
Last year.
And did the FBI, supposedly they would provide assistance, or did you guys do it all on your own? Like there was no grants from the federal government or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
That's programmed it all.
No. Yeah, we did transition to a new records management system, which allowed us to change the way in which we report and now comply with NIBRS.
So there probably are a lot of departments that are still doing the UCR.
Yes.
Ellen? Member Day.
I have a bunch of questions. First of all, the 2021 report is not on the website, so that might be a point of feedback for.
Oh, it's not on there.
It's on there.
It should be on there.
It should be.
Look up AR space 2021 on the city website.
I guess it may not be there. I was looking for.
We have a new website,
Yeah, it just wasn't under. I was looking under transparency.
General information.
Okay.
Under general information, there's a blue bar 4 down called crime stats and annual reports. And then scroll down just above the blue bar of Crime Watch, you'll see the years from 2017 to 2022.
Thank you. I was looking at the wrong place. All right. Thank you. Another question is, I saw percentages of sworn staff. Can you give me the number of sworn staff that we have?
So we have 95 sworn from the chief on down to the officer in the academy. There's a budget, as you know, council's considering a budget next week, which would make a limited period position permanent for 96 sworn. And we have 8 vacancies at the moment.
All right, on gang affiliations, how do you know if a person is gang affiliated?
So our investigators that make a determination and actually have criteria that includes things like graffiti in their possession, tattoos, clothing, association or affiliation with other known gang members or gang affiliates. There's a distinction between the two and a legal process by which we define them. Photos of them in clothing that have the gang symbols on them, or carrying weapons, or being arrested in the commission of a crime, identifying where they self-disclose and actually say that they're either affiliated or members of a gang.
And then I just wanted to clarify the terms for gang cases. I saw gang service is defined as a new gang registrant, so that's like a new person that you've identified as being affiliated, or?
No, so a person who's convicted under an enhancement or identified within the 187.22 as a part of the judicial process, similar to sex offender registrants, get a condition of their probation or parole in which they're a gang registrant, and they are required to come in and register as such. Arson, person convicted of arson is another registration that could happen, as well as certain drug offenses. The court could require registration as well, unless they recently eliminated it. This was back in the day when I was still working a lot, so. Still good. It's still good, okay.
I feel like, am I getting rusty? So and then there was a part of the report that was gang cases. So I wanted clarification on what that term meant.
So, for example, we go to a report of graffiti, local business or location, park, or whatever it might be. And the person that we arrest is graffitiing, my name is Max, and they're not a gang member. That's not a gang case. But if they're graffitiing VMV, XIV, Barrio Mountain View, Norteño, XIV, that potentially then is a gang case, or an assault. An assault's committed, and it's committed by members of the gang that have been identified or validated, we call it, validated as gang members. That would be a gang case.
So as I understand it, any like reported crime that also has a
gang nexus.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean an arrest with it as well. It could be just graffiti by itself.
Camera off. Sorry, no, it's not. It's still visible.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
And then I had a question about 911 calls. Are any calls routed to 988 or like the county MCRT by emergency?
We are in the process now of working out the protocol in which that occurs. We have a unique operating system in which we share a virtual system of dispatch with Palo Alto and Los Altos. So we have the same CAD system. So part of the strategy and working 988 into our call taking is coordinating with those agencies so that there's a commonality in which the calls are processed and handled and then forwarded. So that's in process. All 3 jurisdictions, of course, support that, and we're moving in that direction.
I'm sorry, it was Palo Alto and
Los Altos.
And then since that is still in the works, then a point of feedback would be, we would really love to see like the decision tree that would lead to routing a call to. Another point of feedback is, actually, I'm sorry, was this only questions? Because
We are at questions now, then we'll take comment from the public and then we'll take comment from the PSAB.
sorry.
It's okay.
Just realized. Okay.
Good catch, good catch.
Question about canines. Can we see a breakdown by task of deployments?
You said, I'm sorry, for canine?
Yeah. And then since we have our own canine units, in what situation would we be borrowing like a canine unit from another
Jurisdiction.
That was the word, but I wasn't sure if it was. Thank you.
You were channeling it well, because I saw it on the tip of your mind.
Thank you.
So if we have local resources available, we'll draw from our own resources unless there's a specialty that we don't have locally. For example, a bomb dog, we would call the sheriff's office and request resources for that. Or if our dogs are not working and we have a situation, as an example, a person suspected inside a business and we need a search, and we would call for resources from neighboring jurisdictions to see if they have a canine available to assist with that.
Thank you. There was a mention that catalytic converters is a regional issue. I would like to clarify what region, like county, Bay Area, city,
Bay Area,
Bay Area.
if not the state.
Yeah, it's bad. And then I promise this is the last question. Do the property crimes that are reported, do they include theft of all monetary value, a specific monetary value?
All property crimes, no matter the value.
Okay. That is the last one. Thank you.
I just have one question. A nearby agency has a goal to hit 30% women in their police department by 2030, and I was wondering if Mountain View has a similar goal.
Yeah, I think it's like 30 to 30.
Yeah, 30 by 30.
30 by 30, yes. At the moment, no,
Okay.
but within the industry and within discussions, I'm sure Chief Canfield, that's an area that you can probably look at in this transition as chief.
Thank you.
I'll split mine, some before, some after. I think if we could go back and look at the demographic data. So I'm just trying to understand the columns. So I get census, victims, witnesses, suspects. I think I'm struggling with arrests and citations versus suspects. You could help me understand what the meaning of those columns are.
Sure. So a suspect would be somebody who is described or identified but not arrested. And the individual who's arrested is taken into custody and either booked or cited, and later booked. And a citation is what you would probably commonly think as a traffic violation.
Okay. Remember what slide that is?
Good.
I'm looking at it. Okay. And so, just looking at the numbers, right? It might be a natural thought to say, oh, look at the census numbers on Hispanic or Latino, census numbers on Black or African American, and then look at the suspect and the arrest numbers and just the general contact numbers. And I don't want to draw conclusions either way. I'm just curious. They seem disproportional. What your thoughts are?
Well, I'm not a scientist that analyzes the data. So it is, I think, a discussion nationally that is being held, and a curious question as to the reasoning behind why certain numbers may appear different than what a demographic might be. I think just from an awareness perspective, that the demographics that we may see in the city or contact are not necessarily the population, because we do have a lot of people who drive through, work in the city, may be in the city for a variety of reasons, like a concert, that aren't counted as a member of our census. So we have workers that commute into town that don't necessarily represent the demographics of the residences of the city. So that's one consideration. But if I had the answer, I would probably be famous. So
Similar to the work that you guys heard from Alex Stevenson that we did on the stop data point information. He talks about that as well, about we tend to be an area that is an attraction for certain crimes, right? If you think about it like a business, we're good customers to criminals, right? There's lots of high-tech equipment here that's worth a lot of money that can be sold very quickly. So back to the chief's point about people coming into this city that aren't counted necessarily in the census data as well. You know, when we arrest people, they're not necessarily Mountain View residents.
Another question I had is on the canine unit. I saw the word apprehensions. Is the dog involved in actually physically apprehending the suspect? Or is this when the dog barks? Or, I don't know what an apprehension means.
Yeah, I would need to get the definition to make sure from the canine unit directly, but when I was doing a lot of training with them, an apprehension is anytime somebody gives up and the dog is used. So even if we're on the corner and somebody stops running because they hear the dog barking, that's an apprehension. It
Okay.
doesn't mean a bite.
It doesn't mean the dog was physically involved in like apprehending the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The dogs will only bite or find, right, or bark or alert. We haven't had any that can handcuff yet, right?
no, and there's conditions in which a dog might bite if there are, for example, a risk of great bodily injury, where a handler can then deploy the dog to prevent serious injury or death, right? Or other conditions in which the policy allows. In the bark and hold tactics that we deploy, I'd have to look to see also, but judging by the fact that we're not biting people, the apprehensions are the dog either found the individual and then officers arrested.
Okay.
They don't jump on the person unless the handler determines that's imminent and necessary for safety.
We had a case by the creek that was a stolen vehicle in a foot pursuit. And the suspect ended up in the marshy area and was hiding in the muck, under the water. The dog alerted from the berm area to them and was convinced by the barking of the dog and the officers to come out.
Okay.
That's an apprehension. There was no physical.
Okay. Apprehension is like it's a big word, so I wanted to just make sure I understood. And I'll ask one more and then I'll save my other three for later, but I'm concerned why cyber crime that involves kids is increasing.
So again, that, probably a social scientist would need to maybe take a look at those kind of things and trending information about what's available and what's not, dark web access and not, and just anonymity on the internet itself. It could also be there, and we are just now being able to uncover it better and seeing more crimes because of that, right?
Safe Task Force.
Yeah,
Are you hearing similar trends from neighboring jurisdictions
around the world.
around the world? So it might be just there's better tools to convict people.
To locate them, it could be.
I'll stop there and I'll reserve my other three for later.
Prosecutors, you have another one?
Yes, I have two more. I realized I didn't hear anything about crimes that originate from the homeless. And I remember about 6 or 7 years ago, there was a lot of blaming of crimes on the homeless. Could I have your take on that?
We don't, well, we do track computer aided dispatch, but not in our annual report, encounters involving complaints or crimes with homeless. I don't know. We'd have to determine whether or not we can provide you those numbers. But it's not, the homeless are not a exclusive area of response for us. They are, they involve one of many areas of response for us with relation to both crime as well as mental health, as well as safety and security for them, drug issues and abuse. So it's a very complex issue that we are involved in. And sometimes they are victims and sometimes they are reported as suspects. So.
And also, I've been hearing in different places about the uptick in fentanyl abuse around. So is this something especially prevalent among the homeless, among high school kids, among everybody? Which, again, the feeling, I know you know.
It's across the community in various areas of the community, including homeless, including in schools, including adults. A presentation that was provided a couple months ago from the district attorney's office utilizing EMS and coroner's reporting showed Mountain View's per capita fentanyl overdose deaths, the third highest in the county per capita, behind Gilroy and San Jose. And the numbers are not as high, but the per capita percentage is third highest. And it is an issue. It's a problem. There are other drugs that are trending, xylazine, I believe it's pronounced, a tranquilizer, which is also cut with fentanyl and other drugs, which is even more concerning. Whereas fentanyl is an opiate and can be, the effects of overdose can be reversed with what's called Narcan, which most of us have heard of. Strength of fentanyl is required higher doses of Narcan in order to reverse those overdoses. But the xylazine is not an opiate, and thus Narcan and there's no analgesic that is available for reversing those symptoms and signs. So that is a concerning trend as well. And as we look at the type of narcotics that we've brought into the department and maybe trend that over the 5 years, I don't know what that will show, but it will be an interesting kind of look at how we are encountering and what we're encountering and bringing into the evidence room.
Thank you.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Kind of related to law enforcement and stuff, simply because I was personally involved. Two of your offices came to my property and asked for video of potential theft from a motor vehicle and or vandalism. It was a bit of an effort for me to go through the video and then put it on a Google Drive or put it up in the cloud. I think we sent them a link or whatever. But I never heard back. I know you can't necessarily tell me that John Smith of, Wyandotte Street was arrested for, but it probably wouldn't, from a citizen standpoint, it might not be bad to know that it was helpful or wasn't. I don't know. I also know, I was surprised that you devoted 2 officers to like a break-in in a car. And actually go over the video that, you know, so I don't know, just what, do you have any comment on that kind of scenario? And
Well, I'm glad we're proactive in following up crime. I don't know if it's a person they were looking at who's responsible for multiple crimes, so it might not just have been the one break-in that you've seen, or they're coming to your.
they seemed like they were repeat customers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably an effort to identify and use the word apprehend.
Yeah.
Someone who's committing, or individuals who are committing multiple crimes. The 2-officer car could have been a training car. That's usually the circumstances in which, unless the officers are there for their safety, it could have been a training car.
Yeah.
And then I think you make some valid points about follow-up. They could be in their
Yeah, like-
minds just very focused and unaware of the interest. And a
Like
point we
I'm-
can certainly bring back.
I might not feel like doing it again,
Right.
you know, if I don't,
Yeah.
you know, like, no.
Yeah.
Because the individual is like, oh yeah, he's like, there's a house over here. Yeah, where's the camera pointed? Like, oh, might come back to you later, you know? So.
Yeah, and sometimes we have people from the community that post on Nextdoor that ask their neighbors to help with finding footage in the event of an incident. I always encourage, if you ask the officers for their name and number and a phone, call the police station and ask to speak with them, and then you can ask and say who you were.
Yeah, did it go anywhere?
And, yeah. Did you have any luck? We can tell you if we've arrested someone. That's a public record when someone's been arrested. So that's not confidential.
Yeah.
So there's also, if I can, there's a level of kind of concierge service that we have been talking about for a while in regards to closing the loop, right?
Yeah.
And that is definitely an area that we are challenged with, that we could do a better job on. And that's even with our own staff. If you look at our dispatchers, they often don't know the evolution of a case either. The phone just rings, right? They just hear an officer scream and help for help, and then they never get that resolution.
I mean, I was impressed that 2 people came to my house for video footage of somebody breaking a window and maybe taking a purse or something, but yeah.
I just have 3 questions. For catalytic converters, do you guys have some sort of best practices for protection against that, or is it just kind of we're at the mercy of? Yeah, right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It's a tough one because you're parked, you know, even in your driveway, and it's something that's completely unprotected, and it happens quickly. It's hard to hear and detect sometimes, or even if you hear it, it's hard to catch it in time to go. So it's difficult, and I don't know where the fix on that would be, whether it's the vehicle industry themselves creating a different way to mount that or something. You know, you're talking hundreds of millions of vehicles to. If you look at the root of the problem though and peel it back, you know, what is the incentive for somebody to take a catalytic converter is the other issue. And that's where the larger cases, San Jose PD just had a large case that ended up being basically a chop shop for stolen vehicle parts and things, but had a large component of catalytic converter thefts as well. That was from that RADIF task force was the main player, primary investigating agency in that. So, you know, where they're recycling these need to be held accountable because they're receiving stolen property. Can you serialize it or mark it in a way that you know it's yours? Because right now there's really no serial numbers or anything on them as well. They do sell guards, and we've talked a lot about in community meetings about crime in general. The best way to mitigate any kind of crime is for it to make it take longer to commit. So cages around things and other secure or catalytic converters just cause more time. Right. It's not going to necessarily, they're not going to climb under and say, oh, we should go to the next one. They may still try, it's just going to take them longer, which means we have a better chance of catching them.
For the youth services unit, did you guys find that services were expanding, like more participants, less?
I can only speak to this year.
Yeah.
But it probably started last year. It's definitely trending higher. We have our Dreams and Futures kind of, it's our, summer program that is we're proud of, and we have 50+ participants in those sessions scheduled to participate. So it's full, it's a full house.
Even during the pandemic, the demand and requests for that it's just something that's very popular all the time.
And then my final question is, with regard to calls that are focused on mental health episodes, is there, I feel like we talked about this before, but is there any scenario where a call might get routed to FD instead of the PD, or does it always come to you guys?
Fire may be involved. They may respond if it's a condition in which a mental health hold is required. The police department by law responds because of the authority to put someone on a hold. So it's really a state model that I think a lot of people are talking about to see what alternatives might work well. I get questions, for example, why can't an ambulance be transport? And then if you talk to the paramedics, they are very busy.
Yeah.
They have serious medical calls they're responding to, and so there's a lot of kind of competing interests and responsibilities and priorities that fire is involved in a lot of different areas of medical as well as fire response, and to take those resources, it's kind of a give and take and prioritization.
Okay, understood.
It's important to also call out, each area, city jurisdictions and things are very different. So what works in for the Coots model in one town or, across the country or wherever may not work in another town or Mountain View specifically. That's why we've been for years, even before all of this, trying different types of response to not have the police go if we're not needed for something like that, right? So I think we're sort of coming into a good model now, and with other partnerships and things that are doing for other referrals. That's pretty important. A lot of those alternative services, they're called directly, so we're not even aware unless they request us, and can provide those services without police awareness or response. So those models, I think, are promising. Or 988 as an example, right?
But don't you guys get the 988 calls, or no? Is that someone?
That is
Okay.
Well, our 911 center will refer to 988, right? So if it comes to us and it's appropriate, and those are the protocols that are being solidified, would then be routed to 988, who then makes a determination of what resources are best suited to handle what that request would be. Because I believe there's several models of mental health alternative response, including MCRT, trust, and a variety of others. And they may fill different needs or provide different services that fit whatever the caller's request might be.
Right. Okay. Very good. All right. With that, I think we can take questions from members of the public.
Yes. Yes, comments from the public.
Yes, comments from the public.
Hi, Tim again. Just on the topic of catalytic converters, I'm pretty sure it's a national issue. I think I remember seeing the FBI broke a gang in like New Jersey a couple months ago. So it's all over. It's not just here. Super pleased to see the very limited use of force, and that seems to be consistent through at least the PSAB engagement that I've had. It's very nice. But I have difficulty kind of reconciling the juxtaposition of the extremely limited use of force with what we talked about recently of the military use equipment and the high degree of military equipment that doesn't seem to be used. And with regards to prioritization, It's a question of where and how we're allocating resources a little bit, I think. I noticed also in one of the slides, I don't think this is the best unit to use. And I think about dimensional analysis a lot, and units are important, but if you divide mental health calls for service by number of arrests, even though mental health has been trending down, if you make that comparison, it's actually increasing as a relative percentage. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily the most useful unit, but to be using to look at, but I think the juxtaposition of the extremely limited need for use of force and the amount of resources that are going into weaponry rather than mental health care, things like that. Because mental health crises are health crises. It's not a physical trauma in the same way that someone might be bleeding out, but it can be acutely dangerous, as we saw, I think, like a year and a half ago, when traffic was stopped all day because someone was on the bridge on the overpass of the 101. So I think I don't know, that's a strange juxtaposition that I'm having difficulty reconciling given the data that we have of what we actually see and where we're investing our resources. Thank you.
Any other members of the public who would like to speak? Please issue a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone. Thank you, sir.
Dave Luker, he, him, like Bruce, I'm with the MVC Pro. One of the things we're wondering about, and I think you touched on this, was the 72-hour parking enforcement situation. It looked like it was like slightly on the rise in 2022. One of the things, we were just curious about, because we're kind of hearing different things from the community, is more enforcement happening these days, or no? Or also, if this needs to be in comment form, I'm commenting that we were curious about that. But cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Two online. I believe Bruce England was first.
Thank you. Bruce England again, speaking for MVCPRA. I just have a few things here to share with you, and they're pretty much all questions. So there are three of them. One is, and if this has been asked and answered already, sorry I missed it. Similar question to some of the other ones, though. To what does MVPD attribute the noticeable drop in gang cases? It was pretty noticeable in the chart. Number two, can you tell us what happens with the dogs that retire from the canine program or that have to be removed from the program for other reasons? Just curious about that. And lastly, can you describe what MVPD is doing worth noting to make our roadways as safe as possible for those walking and biking in Mountain View? As you know, there's increased focus now on active transportation in our city. Also, we're wondering if traffic enforcement should or will return to pre-pandemic levels. That's it. Thank you.
The next was Jim Salzman.
Thank you. I also have a comment about my curiosity. I was struck by the traffic enforcement that Bruce just alluded to. It looks like the number of accidents is about 80% of the two pre-pandemic years, 2022, and violations are 40%, half of that from the pre-pandemic era. So I'm curious as to what the department's goals and aspirations are for traffic, and I'm hoping that at a high level, perhaps the department could consider having a community input process to decide how to allocate resources between traffic, property, and person crimes, because I would love to see the community involved in that decision. It's so important. Thank you very much.
Okay. And I will now go back to members of the PSOP with additional questions or comments, and then we'll start with member Iona.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about hate crimes. I may have missed where that was called out. I know it's part of an overall statistic, but if I were to pull out hate crime, Could you, is that somewhere in here or did I perhaps?
No, so the NIBR's reporting, I don't believe, and our internal discussions regarding how this is reported. In years past, elder crime is an example, hate crimes is an example, were specifically accounted for. And that is something I think moving forward, we're going to have to bring back as a part of our annual report. How we do that through the NIBR system will just be a process in which we'll have to work through. So
I'm glad to hear that because I do think that's something that we need to keep.
absolutely.
I was looking at the dispatched calls, the map. What is the difference between dispatched calls by beat? I assume that's somebody calls 911 or the emergency call, versus what is an officer initiated call by beat?
So an officer initiated a traffic stop. Person waves the officer down, flags the officer down and says, I need assistance. And the officer calls that in and reports they're out with the citizen or resident and initiates that particular call for service.
So that includes traffic stops. Got it.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out why beat 2, which just doesn't look that big, had like so many dispatched calls. Definitely beat 1 had the most, but it's very, very large. And I know there's a lot of new apartment complexes there, but what's up with beat 2?
Historically, it's been a busy beat. San Antonio Shopping Center, it's the California Escuela Corridor, apartment complexes, Ranksdorf Park, El Camino Real, and San Antonio. So it's an area of the city in which we have historically consistently seen.
We look at demographic maps, but anecdotally, that area has the most people per square something.
Well, definitely, like if I think about some of the apartment buildings, it's so, I don't know, it's such a large number. I was like, what's happening there? Okay, that makes sense. And then I think some of the questions that were raised by the public, I'm interested in answers to. So just to restate, what's the PD doing about safe roadways? Like, what's the PD's part in that? I think it's an interesting question, and I'd be interested in hearing your take. What does happen to the retired canines? And we all want to, inquiring minds really want to know that, I know. And then is traffic enforcement going to go back up to pre-pandemic levels? I think is actually a good question, especially with the stats that were called out.
Sure. So with safe roadways, we typically, as a city, take what we call the 3 E's. There might be a 4th E now. There's a 4th E: engineering, enforcement, and education. And so the police department, and I'm not sure what the 4th E is, engagement. The police department with its traffic unit addresses areas of collision, high collision areas, intersections, or what we call primary collision factors that are reported in collisions, and work on enforcing those laws that could potentially prevent those collisions, as well as general traffic enforcement, either done by traffic or patrol officers, either through non-citations or citations. The reporting that we do related to collisions is part of what's called SWITR's statewide incident reporting traffic system, which is for our traffic engineers, an important tool for them to determine if locations need to be looked at for engineering and design. And then education, for example, Captain Jaeger, as a part of his traffic experience, brought on Alive 25, which is a diversion program for drivers 25 and under. So instead of going to traffic court or even traffic school, they participate in a program like traffic school at the police department, essentially not needing to go to traffic court if they participate and complete a education program as a part of that effort. So
we try to, the traffic enforcement philosophy is to work through intelligence. So we are looking at where crashes are occurring and where complaints are happening, and where people are concerned about issues, not just where a lot of tickets can be written.
Right.
And so they they try to maximize their time at those places. And the engagement piece is also talking about it, right, over social media while maybe they are out doing something, which is a little backwards to what most people would think. They don't want you to know where they are, but there's, we would rather have 30,000 people on our social media things talking about speeding or stop signs or the importance of crosswalk safety, bicycle safety, those kind of things than, one ticket.
And how does the PD and the other bodies within the city that deal with traffic and safety, how do you all sort of keep in touch on things?
Yeah, so Switters automatically gets updated. So when a traffic report is taken, that gets entered into the Switters the Switters application, or cloud now, I guess, and is available for traffic engineering statewide. So the Mountain View traffic engineering team has access to that, and they can pull up data and these kind of things. But one of the other nice things is that there's a direct connection between traffic engineering and our traffic unit, where that's the other piece of the E is the engineering piece, is that if they're at a scene of a crash and we've had 10 crashes at the same place, the officers are actually thinking, why is this happening, right? Is it a light thing? Is there roadway issues? Are we looking directly into the sun at this time of day when all the crashes are happening?
Right.
And they'll work with engineering to try to mitigate those issues.
If I could add, at the policy level, that's actually officially and formally coordinated through our Vision Zero policy, which is a policy to strive to get to zero fatal collisions. And it does exactly that intelligence-based look at where are there more likely to be, or where in the past have there been injury or other types of collisions, and what are the factors that might contribute to that, and what are the improvements that can be made.
Right.
So there's just a number of traffic improvement, 2 of them going on the council's agenda for next Tuesday. In fact, really large, what they're called road diets, with the number of travel lanes being reduced and the buffered bike lanes being increased, and center medians and bulb outs, all kinds of things to reduce the potential for conflict between car and driver, or car and cyclist and car and ped.
In terms of the activity for pre-pandemic levels, so there's a variety of considerations. One is, of course, the change in patterns of what people are doing post-pandemic, but also staffing internally. So with vacancies, not just formal vacancies, but maybe officers who are off on injury, we've had to limit the number that are assigned to our traffic unit less than what we would ideally have. So as those numbers hopefully begin to improve, the resources and capacity to focus on traffic issues will get better. And so I would imagine the numbers next year reflecting more of what you would see pre-pandemic related to our traffic enforcement.
But also grants. So some of the grants were paused. The Office of Traffic Safety grants for seat belts and distracted drivers. The Chief talked about the primary collision factors for collisions. The top ones are speeding and distraction and DUI, right? And so we look at those as well, and that helps to inform how we do that.
The canines are generally given to the handler. I think they're actually sold for $1 because there's the legal requirement of that city can't gift. But there is a process in place with an agreement, and the retired dog is given that back to the handler and the family.
Liable for anything else that happens. That's what they're signing. The city's no longer.
It's no longer a city asset.
About how you untrain canines. They untrain them, but we'll do that at a later.
They're amazing. They're on and off, just like people.
Yeah.
So they're cool being retired. They're very happy.
Right, okay. It's like, how does that work? Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Is a Google bike driven by a non-Google employee considered larceny?
What'd you do, Derek?
I was in front of my house. I was on a Google bike.
Did your camera catch it?
Yeah,
Did you turn over the footage?
yeah.
So early on with those bikes and the Intuit bikes, the blue
Yeah,
ones,
the end,
right?
yeah.
And other companies that have them too, right? Yeah. I've been all over the world and I've seen Google bikes,
Yeah,
like
really.
in Italy,
Yeah.
right, and stuff, and it's not, well, I mean, maybe it is an employee, I don't know, right? But a lot of that comes back to, you know, what does Google want to do with it? Do they want to recover the,
Okay.
right, the victim of the crime?
Yeah.
They do have an email address and we'll notify them when we see bikes that are in locations, but generally we don't, you know, stop people just because they're riding a Google bike. It would have to be a little bit
Yeah.
more a report about, or
So that in and of itself isn't necessarily enough reasonable suspicion for engaging.
But then you have to determine who looks like a Google employee.
I don't, I'm just.
That's weird.
Not a problem.
I'm like, if you're, would you take that as a compliment or not?
Depends on the day, I don't know. All right, but yeah, so it's a complicated.
Anyone else? Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
thank you.
Thank you for your service and your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And with that, we will move on to item 5.2. But before that, I want to take a 5-minute recess. Because this next one's gonna probably. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
See what it is me. All right, here we go. So the next item will be the fiscal 2023-24 Public Safety Advisory Board Work Plan, and this item will be presented by Assistant City Manager Audrey Seymour Ramberg.
Thank you, Chair Frank. This is the second meeting in a two-step process to develop the PSAB's recommended work plan. The first step was at your last meeting on April 27th, at which you reviewed ongoing and carry forward items as well as suggesting new items. There were 5 new items proposed. And in the interim, Mike and I have analyzed these items related to the criteria that were put forward in the staff report, both for this meeting and the last meeting, which include the fit with PSAB's purview, consistency with existing policy direction from the council, or strategic priorities or any direction given by the council to the PSAB, not duplicating existing city or community efforts, timeliness, the clarity of scope, and the feasibility within existing capacity. And that's both time and expertise, and that's both of the staff that support PSAB as well as PSAB members. As a result of this analysis, staff is recommending a work plan of a total of 9 items. 2 of these are carry forward projects, which relate to prevention of bias and extreme views and policing in Mountain View, and support for the alternative models of mental health crisis response. And those 2 ongoing items are intended to include one of the proposed items, which had to do with increasing resources and awareness for the county's MCRT program, working in coordination with MCRT, as staff felt that that fit really well within the existing mental health crisis response subcommittee. There are also 5 ongoing projects. These are things that come to the PSAB at least once a year, every year. And then there are 2 recommended new projects, and that includes youth substance abuse trends and prevention resources, and forums on the future of community policing. 2 items are not recommended because they are outside the scope of PSAB's mission and will be addressed in other existing city efforts. And those are the review of parking regulations, especially the 72-hour rule, and the review of sanitation needs and options for people living in vehicles. The next step after tonight's action by PSAB to recommend a work plan will be for it to be included with all other advisory body work plans and presented to the council for approval, and that will happen in September. And that concludes my presentation.
Do any board members have any questions before I open this item to the public? Start with Member Tam.
I guess I just wanted clarification on item E. When it says youth substance abuse trends and prevention resources. I'm sorry, when it says recommend, is that making recommendations, research recommendations?
Correct. So this was an item put forward by Vice Chair Lang, and we talked in between so that I could further understand her intention in bringing forward that item. And it really gave some clarity to me around wanting to look at what kinds of presentations, awareness raising, prevention-oriented activities are already underway. What are some best practices that could be researched that aren't in place in Mountain View currently? And then what we would recommend, you as PSAB would recommend within Mountain View for more effective or better following of best practices around those prevention resources. So that's what is meant by recommend.
So that's not limited to the scope of raising awareness. It would also be other possible prevention.
Well, and I mean, it needs to be within the purview of PSAB and the purview of the city. I mean, we can't recommend what the county should do with regard to its public health and behavioral health services. We can certainly share the PSAB's findings around what the trends are and what the PSAB believes to be best practices, but we can't make recommendations to bodies outside of the city entity. I mean, similarly, the city council doesn't make recommendations to the county, and PSAB as advisory body wouldn't be in a position to do that. So there would be inherently some limitation to making recommendations to the police department. And the kinds of things that the police department does are primarily around awareness raising, although there are enforcement efforts too, but I'm not sure that that was the intention of your colleague, but I'll let her speak to that, whether or not you were hoping to have some engagement around what we do to enforce juvenile drug abuse.
I think in terms of recommendations, I do recognize that we can't make recommendations to the county. I think I was really looking for what we could, like best practices, like you said, for the police department, and maybe if there's some things that might be able to happen in the city more broadly that would be really helpful, then I think those things were, I guess, potential paths forward that I was looking into. And in terms of enforcement, I think the thing is I don't really know that much about it yet, which is why I think the research part is really important. But I think that if there are things that we learn that could be changed, then I think that would be a discussion that I hope to have.
I guess my question was like, can we make recommendations that are still within the purview of the city, may not necessarily be specific to the police department in terms of.
Can you give an example of what that might include?
I don't know, a prevention measure that might involve like a different department, like the library, Parks and Rec, something that's still like within the city, not reaching out to the county, but is not specifically police department related, or like, even fire. Yeah, I'm just trying to.
I think that would be a good question for whatever subcommittee gets created if this does move forward on the work plan, to see what do the best practices in prevention, who do those involve? I mean, do they evolve across disciplinary or cross departmental approach with other city departments? I know that there are at the county level, they're really encouraging the supply of Narcan be made available in different places, including in libraries. So there are some emerging practices that maybe don't prevent substance use, but could prevent accidental substance overdose. And so I think it will probably be a factor of where the best practice research takes the subcommittee in terms of where those recommendations are, and then making sure to scope those within things that are within the feasibility of the city to be able to carry out. Does that make sense?
Yes. That's all my questions.
Next is Rudowski.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. At the end of this table, it says items 10 and 11 are not recommended as they are outside of the scope of the PSAB. And since these are the ones that I wanted, I'm upset about it. So, and it says these will be addressed by existing city efforts. Example?
Yes, the city council has identified a review of on-street parking regulations and practices as part of its fiscal year 2023 to 2025 work plan. So there will be staff assessment and council direction provided on that. And if the council were to determine that a role for PSAB would be appropriate within that, they could so direct, but right now they've got that covered.
Okay. Another one.
And I can give you example on the other, which was the sanitation options, the needs and options. That's going to be looked at by the city as part of our homelessness response strategy.
So who's looking at it?
The city manager's office. We have a human services division that is responsible for our safe parking program, our liaison with Life Moves interim housing, with our Elevate MV guaranteed basic income program, with our support of all the mental health alternatives, and they will be doing a comprehensive homelessness response strategy.
There was one other question that somebody brought up to me outside of this. Let's see. The person who called me said that there are 29 new toilets going in somewhere in Mountain View. Do you know where those are going?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Does the number, I didn't hear anything about it. Does the number ring a bell? Does anybody?
I also heard the 29. And I asked Kimberly Thomas about it and Brittany. They have never heard of it either, but it's a very oddly specific number.
That just means that somebody might have invented it, so.
But I also read that.
Okay, so maybe it's not 29, it's 30, and it means.
Well, I mean, there's not a city program that's looking to place porta potties throughout the city, so 29 or any other number. So I don't know where that might be coming from.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Member Ayer?
I have a quick question on item 9 on the forums on the future of community policing. Ms. Ramberg, you and I have chatted about the possibility of 3 as a number that this body might take on should this item be included in our work plan. I was curious if that, I just wanted to confirm that you're still of the mind that that is a number that is feasible.
I think it will be good to have a little flexibility on that and say up to 3.
Okay.
So that the subcommittee can really, with the support of the PD, look at what the topics are and who the participants would be and what the logistics of making that happen, and determine within the course of the fiscal year what is doable. I know with my experience supporting the Human Relations Commission, they usually only commit to 2 events a year, sometimes 3. And it's often a challenge for them to accomplish those events within a year, because things invariably take longer to plan than one thinks that they maybe should. So I talked with then Captain, soon to be Chief Canfield, about what kinds of resources he thought it would take to make that work, and what kind of topics he thought might be of interest to the community, and also, of interest to the police department. And I think it's going to be good to continue that conversation to see, the number that would be feasible to make happen over the course of a fiscal year.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else?
I don't have any questions.
Very good. All right. With that, we can go to comments from members of the public. If any member of the public would like to provide a comment on this item, please do so by submitting a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone. Thank you, sir.
Hi all. Work plan looks nice. I think the time limited subcommittees, the mental health response, the bias and extremism, making sure that that's not present in our community. And jump back and look at the agenda. The youth substance trends, those problems I don't think are going to go away. I think it might make sense to have those be ongoing. Probably wouldn't need to be the same depth after like an initial bit, but those ones seem like they might be worth continuing, like that bias and extremism. The FBI made a report about a concerted effort by right-wing extremists to infiltrate law enforcement back 20 years ago. This is not an issue that's just gonna dissipate. So I think sort of having not necessarily bounding in time in the same way. And some of the questions and discussion I heard, I think ties in a little bit with something I heard a commenter make in the unagendized portion of perhaps reconsidering what the scope of public safety does not necessarily mean the police. There are lots of aspects to public safety, including fire, mental health, various different divisions within the municipality. So especially with our long-term liaison, who's now going to step up to be the chief, moving where there's kind of a natural shakeup occurring, it may be a time to sort of reconsider who the city staff liaison is, and encompassing a broader view of public safety. That doesn't mean the police, which the main duty of the police is law enforcement. They are the armed agents of the state tasked with enforcing the laws. They are the people who have the monopoly on violence that we as individuals have ceded to the state. That is what the police is, and that is a small aspect of public safety, but not the only one. So I think that idea of broadening the staff liaison or reconsidering may be very important. Thanks.
We have one online, Bruce England.
Thank you, Bruce England again for NBC Pro. I was going to say another organization name. I have 6 comments for NBC Pro, but they're fast, so just zip through them here. In the discussion about the Clear Act Extremism Subcommittee, we would like to see new members sooner considered for that to fill the existing vacancy. It seems like a reasonable allocation of the time of a new member, although of course she would have to agree to that. Number 2, although September for work plan approvals is a standing timeline for the city, we question why this occurs so much after the start of the fiscal year. It's a general comment there. Number 3, we support the inclusion of a subcommittee to look into substance abuse trends and resources, in particular given Member Wang's knowledge of experiences among her peers. Number 4, we believe the mental health crisis response, bias and extremism in policing and youth substance abuse items should not be time limited, although regular report backs from the city and county would likely suffice, with feedback from PSAB and members of the community considered each time. Number 5, we are still hoping that the county and city can provide infographics or other resource materials describing process flow used by all of the 988 related programs, as discussed by PSAB earlier in their requests. And lastly, please describe more the existing city efforts that are considering covering a review of sanitation and hygiene needs. As you know, we currently have a serious shortage of any public facing restrooms, water fountains, and cleaning facilities. This is a problem affecting everyone in Mountain View, not just the homeless. Facilities can include portable toilets, but also adequate coverage provided by other public facilities such as city park restrooms. Either way, we do not have enough of these currently. Knowing there are no plans to place portable toilets in our city is telling. Thank you.
All right, very good. Coming back to the board for any further comments, anyone? Member Ayer.
I had a question for the chief, and I'm realizing the answer could impact the work plan in terms of what we're looking for. I'm not sure. So we're not allowed to go out of order, but permission to ask my question. Can I do that?
You're able to ask the question, of course.
It was a question that I wanted to do later because it's not actually has to do with this, but I'm babbling. I'll just ask my question. Chief, I don't know if Saul had a chance to share my questions with you before you got here, but I was trying to prep him. So with the Clear Act, with the actions of Officer Wong, with the Mistral incident, PSAB members heard about this from other folks, not from PD. And I'm wondering about learning about those incidents in a more timely manner, not to serve as some sort of overseeing body, and not to get involved in how you execute disciplinary actions, but just to be more informed about the types of things the PD is dealing with. So that level of detail beyond just having a number on a spreadsheet of an incident happened in the quarterly or bi-yearly update, so that we can be more effective in responding to when the public asks us questions about how PD is responding, and just I guess have a little bit more color commentary on what you're dealing with. Because sometimes we're dealing in a lot of data, but we don't have that narrative around that. And I feel a little constrained without that. And so the reason why that might impact the work plan is right now it's basically twice yearly contact and feedback data report. I think what I'm asking for is a bit more proactive involvement of PSAB when these incidents happen. Again, not to get into overseeing you guys or getting into how discipline is meted out, but just understanding what you're going through and how that impacts how you're running the department.
So currently and prior to PSAB, the daily issues are communicated through the city manager's office with council awareness and often city attorney involvement because of the confidential nature and potential legal issues surrounding certain incidents that we might be involved with, whether it is internal or external. Yeah, crime, major crime in the city. I think the city manager's office would likely have to think about or work through that desire as part of the change in this board's focus or attention. And maybe the council as well. There would be a lot of, I think, thought that would be needed with respect to, for example, some of what I briefed the council on is closed session, and whether this body would have that opportunity or that's something that's necessary.
Yeah.
So.
I think that there's confidential information and it would not be in the flow of that information to have it go to PSAB if it's within the city attorney's office or closed session. But once information is publicly available, I think we could look at what the protocols could be for either adding that as the color commentary when the biannual report comes out. So things are a little bit less statistics and provide a little bit more in the way of examples where that information is public. So I think we're kind of limited to that category or segment of information. And then the question is, what would be the best way to and most feasible way to make that information more available to the PSAB. I don't necessarily consider it as a work plan item because there, as you yourself noted, there's not something that the PSAB is charged to do. Council hasn't asked for that role from the PSAB, but if it's part of how you feel you're better able to understand what's happening in the police department and better able to be a liaison between the police department and the community, then we would look at, what would be the flow of that publicly available information that wouldn't necessarily need to be even on an agenda. And I don't think it needs to be a work plan item.
Okay, that's why I wasn't sure. But yeah, I want to be respectful if something's with the city attorney, right? I'm not, but I have to know. That's not where I'm going at. But if something's, available because of the Clear Act, like this Officer Wong thing, right, writing all he's putting out his biases on Instagram. I don't want to be the last one to know, that feels a little
Yeah.
bit strange. When people are asking me about it and I'm like, "Ooh, what's that?" I would like to feel like I can respond because I do get questions and from community members because they know that I sit here. And I'd like to be able to answer them to the best of my ability. And I've been feeling a little bit behind the times. So does that,
I understand.
that make sense? Okay. All right. Okay. I thought maybe it was going to impact the work plan and that's why I wanted to bring it up. So, okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you have to forgive me because I don't know what the formality of this is, but only just because my name was brought up by Mr. England about the Clear Act subcommittee, if that was something that maybe I'd be interested in. I just wanted to let everybody know that it's something I'd be interested in that is helpful for me, so. Thank you.
So like Clear Act, if I'm not mistaken, is to do with making public information about investigative.
SB 16.
Yeah.
I assume that's.
So the subcommittee relates to understanding the findings of the state report regarding extremism and policing. Is that the one that you meant?
Yes, ma'am.
Subcommittee, yeah, okay. That's on tonight's agenda for your board to be able to make that appointment since we do have a vacancy, and it's good to know that you're willing to serve.
You weren't really going to get an option anyway, so.
Oh, okay.
You've already been drafted. I'm totally teasing. I'm totally teasing. Anyone else? Really?
Why do you keep making that questions? I'm waiting for the discussion.
Oh, the discussion part. Okay. All right.
I think we're into discussion now.
This is
Okay,
discussion.
now we're-
Yes.
Let's go start the discussion.
I'm waiting for you to discuss. Go ahead.
I would offer one discussion thing that you mentioned, and I don't mean to make this directly at you, but in my experience and in sort of watching my father do this work in his boards, people would often ask him about things that happened with the PD, and either he's just got a great poker face or he just didn't say anything, but he didn't always feel it necessary. It's not always necessary in my view from my perspective and my experience. It's not always necessary for us to have an opinion on everything that happens with public safety the moment somebody hears about it or the moment that it happens. I think it's important for us to be patient enough to wait till we are given the information or we ask for the information and are provided the information. And then we can talk about it if it's appropriate with all of the information rather than feeling like we have to be a source of everything public safety. I don't necessarily believe that is my role to just be like the reporter to the city for everything public safety related. I want to be able to advise and provide good opinions and thoughts and experience and sort of citizenry about the things that we want our city to do and our police department to be involved in. But I don't necessarily feel like I need to be a reporter to people asking questions. I feel like it just takes time to hear all that information. So that would just be my comment about that particular issue. But I know that people like to know stuff in news as soon as I have it. So, okay, so I started it.
Thank you. All right, well, this is not in regard to that, but in regard to the work plan. So I guess we're transitioning to discussion about what we want on the work plan. Awesome. Yeah, I think I am in favor of all the things that I think staff recommended to the work plan. I just want to check in really quickly, and I know that this can't happen this time, but I would love for it at next meeting to hear a little bit more about an update, I guess, from the subcommittee on bias and extremism and policing. I think I'm really interested in to see what they found. I think I kind of lost that in the mix a little bit. So I'd love to
it is on next meeting's agenda.
Yay, awesome. Yeah, and I think for the item 8, so youth substance abuse trends and prevention resources. In terms of, I guess, the focus on youth, I think I'm definitely very much in favor of that, but I do want to also kind of explore what this means for the rest of our community as well. So not just the youth population, but everyone as well. I'm not sure really how to navigate that with staff resources. But I do think that's something that, like, especially if we realize from looking at the data that there's also a really big problem in other populations, I do want to be able to kind of do something about that. So that's kind of an open thought. And also on that same item, I think, like earlier, Member Tang was saying, I do really hope that the scope of this subcommittee that is formed does allow us to provide recommendations beyond the police department if that's what we find, just so that we don't find out things that we could do better and then accidentally have limited ourselves in the beginning. So that's something that I think is really important to me. But mostly on that first question on the agenda item. Or on the
Focus on youth versus the whole population. When I spoke with Mike Canfield about it, he was talking about at least his perception on the difference between the level of awareness and knowledge and the opportunity to make a meaningful difference in the choice process for someone in abusing or using drugs, that it would be much higher for the youth population and therefore much more possible to make a positive difference than it might be with adults who presumably have had more exposure to information, more exposure to influences, more brain development around risk-taking and decision-making, and a more difficult opportunity to make an impact through awareness raising and other kind of prevention resources, which isn't to say that there aren't prevention strategies for people of all ages. But I think part of the limitation that we have as a city is that we're not a behavioral health provider. We're not a mental health or substance abuse provider. We're a city. And so we have police departments, we have, community services, we have library services, and the ways that we overlap with the issues might give us more leverage when it relates to youth as it does to adults.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering if, I know for the mental health crisis subcommittee, this feels so long ago, but I know that we had, well, since I was going to Los Altos High School, we had kind of a channel of communication, especially with the the school counselors and just like admin and people there. And I think especially since this pertains to youth, I'm wondering if we might be able to open a similar channel of communication, not to give them recommendations, but just to kind of gain a better picture of what's happening.
Sure. Yeah, I think when the Human Relations Commission did similar work around LGBTQ needs and assets and immigrant needs and assets, there was information sharing with the variety of entities in the community that, have a shared concern or a shared responsibility in those areas, but it wasn't like making recommendations or findings that what others should do. And that was a distinction of being, let's share with what we learned, similar to what we did with the mental health.
I think that'd be really helpful. Okay. And just a final thing, or just one last thing for now. For the forums on future of community policing, I'm wondering if anyone on the board, or if you have any more specifics about like currently what you're thinking it looks like or what it entails.
Well, first, I'd like to give Member Ayer an opportunity to comment, as you were the person who put that idea forward. And then I'm happy to share what I can recall of my conversation with Captain/Chief Canfield about the kinds of topics that came to his mind as being of potential shared interests between the community and the PD.
I haven't given it a whole lot of thought in terms of detail, but we have Chief Lizelle and some other members of the community, including the police chief of Los Altos, participated in a community policing forum earlier this year as part of a meeting that the foundation put on. And I got a lot of really good feedback from that event. But people were like, but I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. And so I think the idea of being able to hear directly from the police, from members of the police department, and actually engage in an interactive discussion of how policing could evolve, right? Share ideas, the police department give insights, right? I think gives a lot of the word I'm looking for, which I'm not finding right now, but agency is the agency to community members to be participating in their in how their city works. And so in terms of topics, I can just share what I heard after the convening. So there was interest in sort of in people really understanding how the school resource officer program works in detail, like how, you know, not to come together and argue whether it should exist or not. That's not what this is. It's really informative. And then if there you know, if there are hard questions, nobody's going to shy away from that, but it's not meant to come together and like, let's do battle or anything. It's really informative. And then, you know, it's an opportunity for people to share their views and for the police department members to hear directly rather than having it messenger via us or other folks. So that's kind of where my head was. And I thought maybe doing between 3 and 5 within a year might be good. So I was trying to see if PSAB could take a couple and maybe some community groups maybe take a couple, maybe the foundation does a couple, 1 or 2, right? But together, you know, we might offer something really interesting for residents.
Yeah, I think that sounds really great. What I'm kind of hearing is something similar to MEPDX, but that's less of a commitment or less of a, like MEPDX is kind of a long program. So something that they can learn, go and kind of be more specific about what the topic is this time and learn about just that without having to really commit themselves to a long time, but really gain a lot of information.
I think so. I think it's learning, and I think I would also say interacting, right? I think that's really critical. It's not just hearing information presented, but being able to respond, not just through Q&A, but I anticipate there could be small groups of discussion. You know, there could be some brainstorming, right? I think depending on the topic, there's other, it doesn't just have to be a one-way presentation.
If it's helpful, I can share some of the topics that Mike had in mind. He thought use of new technology, including military equipment, might be a good topic. De-escalation and the different options for mental health response, use of force, including canine, recruitment and retention, especially around the goal for diverse workforce. And community engagement. How is it that people want to be engaged? And how do they want police to interact within the neighborhoods? As in, that's something that I recall coming up at the last PSAB meeting, is the, you know, the presence in neighborhoods and being more part of the community for some of the topics.
We're going to bring back foot patrol.
Anyone else?
You're looking at me. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say, Pete?
Thought leader.
I mean, I guess my only comment really on the work plan is I would like to vote on the item as originally proposed by Vice Chair Wong. on with the scope of it to substance abuse trends and prevention, not limited to youth. That's my own.
You don't want it limited to you. You want it to just generally be substance abuse trends and prevention. Well, I thought it was always.
Now looking at the memo, just the suggested item was examine substance abuse trends, and it didn't say anything about youth.
So I didn't realize that. Okay.
I know, like, do you? Okay.
Yeah, I do think, like I was mentioning earlier, I do think there's a lot of value in seeing what we can do beyond youth. But also, I don't know, I think it's also difficult because like I also want to be able to make something like impactful, or to do for the subcommittee to actually have some sort of solid recommendations or understand best practices. And I think those vary greatly among populations. So what might work best for youth might not work best for other parts of the community. So I guess that's something I'm also thinking about. And I think I definitely introduced the item as for all of the community, but also my personal focus is usually on youth. So I think maybe starting off with youth, and maybe if we open an entire can of worms, seeing if we can put that in for next year's work plan.
I would support sticking to youth only because, and my conversations with Mike and Saul, the problem with fentanyl among youth is pretty severe because everything has fentanyl in it and they don't seem to understand that. And so like as a parent of a now 18-year-old, it would just be devastating to me. So to hear about other parents having children, it gets me completely emotional. So I would personally think that that's more of an emergency problem for me personally, but I totally support also figuring out like how can we reduce it everywhere else.
I'll support focusing on youth, at least for now. No promises about future work plans, and Dave, I pray for you as parents.
Thank you. And I will back your play for a later amendment. Does anyone else have any other comments on this topic? Very good. Okay.
You want to call for a motion?
So I guess the motion is, do we accept this as?
Staff recommendation.
Yeah, do we accept the, so I needed a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
I move to accept the staff recommendations as written.
I second the motion.
Ms. Renberg, would you like to take a poll?
With pleasure. Chair Frank?
Aye.
Vice Chair Wang?
Yes.
Member Tang?
Aye.
Member Brodowski? Member Ayar?
Yes.
Member Langton?
Yes.
And Member Souter? And then I think we have another possible motion to appoint Member Souter to the Extremism and Policing Subcommittee.
I move to appoint Darlene Salvin as new member of the Clear Act and Insurance Subcommittee.
I second the motion, but I don't think it's a Clear Act subcommittee. I think it's a racism and or bias and extremism.
Sometimes we call it the Clear Act Subcommittee. I don't know. It's got like 3 names. Sorry.
I feel like I can't be as passionate as you are. I second the motion.
I'm just enthusiastic.
Thank you. Okay. I was trying. Just like.
Ms. Renberg, would you like to take a poll?
I would be happy to. Chair Frank?
Aye.
Vice Chair Wang?
Yes.
Member Tang?
Aye.
Member Brodowski?
Could you repeat what I'm voting on?
It is to appoint member Souter to the vacancy on the subcommittee related to extremism and bias in policing. Thank you. Member IR?
Yes.
Member Langton?
Yes.
Member Souter?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries.
What if she'd said no? What would have happened?
And with that, we can move on to 5.3.
Correct.
So election of a board chair, assistant city manager member, could you please provide information regarding the commission officer election process?
I'd be happy to do that. And before that, and I didn't place this in the script, so my apologies. I think as a point of process, you could choose to take public comment on both 5.3 and 5.4 together now ahead of the process of nominations, in that as an agendized item, each of these are subject to public comment. So this would be a good opportunity to see if there's any member of the public who would like to speak on either matter.
Certainly. So would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raised hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
Wait, point of clarification is this, are you combining the?
Speak to either 5.3 or 5.4.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
This would be for election of chair or vice chair.
Hi, all. I think that board member Wang, Vice Chair Wang, has done an excellent job being vice chair, and the board has kind of already set up a little bit of a tradition, or it's 2 points. You need a third point to make a line or a trend, but of passing the baton from chair to vice chair. I think that'd be great. And member Tang has always been very active, asking a lot of questions, engaged throughout, and I think would make an excellent vice chair. Good luck making the decision, y'all.
Thank you.
We have two online. The first is Bruce England.
Hi, Bruce England again, speaking for MVCPRA. Just want to repeat what Tim just said. We're in favor of member Tang to take the chair, member Wang to take the chair position and member Tang to take the vice chair position for the next period of time. Thanks.
Our next is Alex Brown.
Yep. Same as the previous two commenters. Jeanette, if you've got time to do it, I think you'll do great. Happy to see you elevate.
Thank you. And with that, I think we can continue.
Great. Okay, so the process will be for the chair to request nominations. Anyone can be nominated and people can nominate themselves. We'll start with the chair nominations. The chair would ask if for the first person nominated as chair, the current chair would ask that nominee if they are so willing to serve. And then the chair will ask if there are any additional nominees. And again, nominations can be made by another member of the body or by the person themselves. Then I will take a roll call vote on the first person nominated. If a majority of the commission votes in favor of the first nominee, that person will be elected. If a majority of the commission does not vote in favor of the first nominee, then I will take a roll call vote on the second nominee if there was one. And this would continue until a nominee receives a majority vote. If no nominee receives a majority vote, the commission could have dialogue and then go through a revote process. So the very first action will be for the chair to open the floor for nominations for the position of chair.
Okay, so I will open the floor for nominations, but I don't know what my vice chair situation is because she's very busy. So I will also offer that I am willing to serve again if necessary. Now, does anyone have any nominations to offer?
I nominate Jeanette Wang.
Jeanette, are you willing to serve?
Yes.
Does that need a second?
It does not need a second. So you may ask if there are any other
Are
nominations.
there any other nominees for chair?
With that, I can take a roll call vote for the position of chair for which Vice Chair Wang has been nominated. I'll start with Member Souter.
I vote for,
It's an I vote if you support Vice Chair Wang as nomination for chair.
and I vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Oh, I see what you said. I'm sorry. No. 9:30.
Member Langton.
Yes.
Member Ayar.
Yes.
Member Brodowski.
Yeah, I vote aye.
Member Tang.
Aye.
Chair Frank.
Absolutely.
Okay. Vice Chair Wang.
Yes.
Okay, so now what happens is you pass the imaginary gavel on to Chair Wang, and
Oh, wait.
you can now open the floor for nominations.
Working hard.
Oh, you have it?
Yes. You can open the floor for nominations for the position of vice chair.
Do I need to ask you to provide information on the process?
It's the same process that I just read, but where the floor is being open for the nominations of vice chair.
All right, the floor is now open for nominations for vice chair.
I would like to nominate Member Tang.
Are there any, Member Tang, are you willing to serve?
Yes.
Yes. Are there any additional nominees?
With that, I can take a roll call vote. Please signify by yes or aye if you support the nomination of Member Tang to be vice chair. I'll start with Chair Wang.
Yes.
Member Frank,
Absolutely.
Member Brodowski,
Yes.
Member Ayar, Member Langton,
Yes.
Member Souter,
Aye.
and Member Tang.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. All right, congratulations. You've now voted in a peaceful transition of power. The chair and vice chair.
What if it wasn't?
Hey, we don't have to take Act One.
Hey, we have security today.
In uniform. Okay, congratulations to you both. Thank you for your service. Okay, so now we are on to the last item on the agenda.
All right. The last item is board staff comments, questions, and committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by PSAB at this time. Do any PSAB members or staff have comments or questions? Member Ayar.
Thank you, Chair. It feels tiny saying that. I have two questions. One is for Chief Odell. Question, Chief, about the 72-hour memo, or the, I don't know if memo is the right word, but the clarification. I was going back through my notes, and I'm recalling that when this first came up to council, there was a request to somehow codify that prior to a vehicle being towed, like an inhabited vehicle being towed, or a vehicle being repeatedly cited, that an attempt would be made to reach out from the community outreach officer to a CBO. And currently it would be Jen Leah to Malia at Reach SV. And I'm remembering this discussion, but I didn't see that in the 72-hour document that came out. Am I misremembering that, or is that captured elsewhere?
I don't know if you're misremembering. I think within the policy versus procedure, right, the areas of which, for example, in the policy, talking about mitigating circumstances and reasonable accommodation and officer discretion, and then officers potentially using discretion when individuals are not able to move the vehicle, has been applied with our community outreach officer. And that practice has been longstanding and done even without the community's request to do so. It's been an approach. So the discretion is built within the policy to allow for an officer to apply that practice, and is done in accordance with our day-to-day operations.
Yeah, I mean, it's working great. It's just, I'm recalling, may have been Councilmember Ramirez, I'm not 100% sure, asking for that to actually be documented. That's what I'm like, am I remembering this correctly, right? It's not broken by any means, and it's not that putting it down on paper would suddenly change anything, but it was, I feel like that might have been requested, and does anyone else remember? I don't know.
I was at that meeting and I don't recall.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay, so I guess if Councilmember Ramirez has something to say about it, he'll say something about it. Looking for my notes, and I was like, wait a minute. And then my second question is, so last year we decided to move to a 6 meeting format versus the 8 meeting format because staff's time is limited and we want to be respectful of our bandwidth and you know, just the amount of work that's on everyone's plate. At the same time, as I reflect on this year, I feel like our meetings are very packed and they're getting longer. Sometimes I've been getting home like around 11, 10:30, 11. We're talking about potentially 4 subcommittees that need to report out. And I've been feeling having meetings every couple of months, it has left me feeling a little bit disconnected. Like sometimes the thread of topics, I lose them. Maybe I'm just getting older. I don't know, but
Welcome.
I don't know. I'm kind of missing the cadence we had. I'm wondering if I don't want to just say, oh, could we put an agenda item to vote on going back to 8 meetings a year? Because there's a reason we moved to 6. But I'm wondering if we could, well, one, I'm curious if anyone else was struggling with moving to 6, if people had feelings about that. I just felt more disconnected and I felt overwhelmed by the amount of information we're getting at each meeting. If we could go back and revisit whether there's any other way to do this to kind of address those issues that have come up. And
Can I
so,
make a couple of points?
yeah, of
When,
course.
when you're finished, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure the right way to do this, like, is it requesting, could we look at this as part of the agenda when we reconvene in October? Or exactly what the thing was, but I'm not feeling very effective at the moment. And part of that, I feel, is the cadence of these meetings. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. A couple of points. We have 7 scheduled meetings in 2023, not 6. So we went from I think it was 8 to 7. And the next meeting is in August, not in October.
Okay.
And the tentative agenda would have us adopting the 2024 meeting schedule in December. So I think that would be a perfect time to have this discussion.
So it's a calendar year.
Correct.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was
Yeah.
fiscal or where it was.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Could you clarify that again? That we're having 7 meetings?
We have 7 scheduled meetings for 2023. There wound up being
Calendar year. So it
correct
starts with
in January, correct.
January, March, and then we missed one.
Our scheduled meetings were not exactly every other month because it was dependent on what was happening in each month. We would have been a start in February, but we needed to cancel the February meeting. So we had a January meeting, a March meeting, an April meeting, a June meeting. We'll have a meeting in August, we'll have a meeting in October and a meeting in December.
Oh, we'll have a December. Okay, I thought December, January was off. Okay.
Yeah. So it's looking at what the cadence is of the items that come on a regular basis. It's looking at when there tend to be vacations and recesses by the council and often staff vacations. And then it's looking at what workload and ability to logistically prepare for and be ready for meetings on a monthly basis.
Wondering, with 4 subcommittees, right, if a subcommittee has an update, I think the subcommittee should give the update, but if we stagger them, I'm wondering, 'cause I'm hesitant to have 4 subcommittees doing their full report outs every time we meet. I just want to have more discussion, I guess, like I want to chat with my fellow board members about stuff, and I feel sometimes that you just have so much information to process, we don't have as much, people get tired and we don't have as much time to just kind of see how we're all kind of check in and see what's on our minds.
Personally, it was my anniversary tonight and having a shorter agenda would be nice, but.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
You have to make some sacrifices in this life.
We're gonna go see a stinky flower on the weekend. That's corpse flower at the Conservatory of Flowers is possibly blooming this week.
Stink.
As a biology teacher. Go see it.
In San Francisco. You guys know how to, like how you do.
That is very exciting.
6 years.
That's the stinky flower year.
Brand new set of anniversary traditions.
Millennials are setting new trends.
Now I want to know what the other years are, but no. Member Brodowski, I saw that you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to echo what Kavita is saying. And I know that this isn't to be discussed at this meeting, but in the future, I would like to see a winter recess and a summer recess, and then concentrated meetings like February, March, April, May, and then September, October, November. Or it couldn't be December, but August, September, whatever. But I'd like to see eight meetings during the year and jammed together in 2 parts.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions? All right. We will now move on to the final item of tonight's agenda, adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 9:42 p.m.
Bang the gavel.
Bang, bang.
Congratulations.